This dock is not a place for people who read about ships." The words came down the catwalk ahead of the man who said them, flat and carrying, the way a voice carries in a graving dock at 6:30 in the morning when the machines are still cold. Chief Petty Officer Garrick Sturgis had a clipboard in his left hand and a paper cup of coffee in his right, and he had stopped 12 feet from the woman at the rail because he had recognized her face. "Go find a desk," he said. "There's a whole building of them across the yard." The woman did not answer him. Dry Dock 4 was a rectangle of poured concrete 480 meters long, and at the bottom of it, on 206 keel blocks, sat a guided missile destroyer that displaced 9,200 tons and had not touched water in 41 days. Under the sodium lights, the hull was the color of a wet knife. The air at the Soul was 11 degrees cooler than the air on the pier. She had been down there since 6:15. She wore blue coveralls with nothing on them. No name tape, no rank, no patch, no lanyard. A hard hat with a blank visitor sticker of the kind the pass office hands out by the roll. Leather gloves worn through at the fingertips of the right hand, and nowhere else. For 16 minutes, she had walked the port block line under the keel, and at every block she had stopped, laid her right hand flat on the cap, and counted. Block 41, Block 42, Block 43. 2 riggers had watched her come down the ladder and gone back to work, because in a shipyard, nobody asks a person in coveralls who they are. A person in coveralls at 6:15 in the morning is a person with a reason to be there. At 6:31, she had come up to the catwalk at the altar level to read the shoring layout posted under glass, and that was where her brother found her. "You hear me?" Garrick said. He was 49 and had been in the Navy 24 years, one short of the wall. He had come in at 25 after 7 years as a structural welder in a civilian yard, and he had never once let anybody forget the order those two things had happened in. He wore coveralls, too. His had a name tape. "I asked you a question." She turned her head and looked at him and said nothing at all, and that was the thing that did it. Not the coveralls. The silence. He set the coffee cup on the rail very carefully, the way a man does when he has decided something. "You are standing on my dock," Garrick said, and he put his hand on her shoulder to turn her toward the stairs. "And I am telling you where the stairs are." He shoved. It was not a large motion. That was the thing people who were not there always got wrong afterward, and there were 9 people there. 18 inches, flat to the shoulder with the heel of the hand, and it was enough, because the catwalk rail at the altar level stops at 38 inches, and she was 5'7". She went over backward and sideways. There was 6 feet of open air between the catwalk and the scaffolding stage below it. She caught the edge of the stage plank with her right forearm on the way down, which turned the fall into a landing, and hit on her hip and her shoulder, and rolled once against the towboard. A grinder running somewhere aft cut out. The sound of it stopping was louder than the fall had been. Nobody moved for 2 full seconds. Then a rigger named Delgado came down the ladder at a speed that would have gotten him written up on any other morning, and the dockmaster's shack door banged open on the opposite wall. "Ma'am, don't move." Delgado had his hands out, not touching her. "There's a stretcher on the pier, 3 minutes. I'm fine. Ma'am, I'm fine." She said it the second time exactly the way she had said it the first. Same volume, same pitch, no air behind it. She sat up, turned her right forearm over once, flexed the hand, got her boots under her and stood. She brushed the rust off her sleeve. She did not look up at the catwalk, not once. Thaddeus Quill had come out of the shack at the sound and seen the last half of it, and the whole of the part that came after, which in 29 years of standing on the walls of dry docks he had never seen before. She did not look at the man who had pushed her, A person who has been shoved looks at the person who shoved them. It is not a decision. It is a reflex older than language, and it arrives before the pain does. And Quill had watched 1,000 men and women take a shove on a dock, and every one of them had turned their head. This one had not. This one had checked her arm, stood up, and put her hand back on the block cap she had been counting from, which was block 44. Quill was 57. He had retired 11 years earlier as a Master Chief Hull Maintenance Technician and had come back through the gate the following Monday as a civilian dock master. He came down the ladder and crossed the sole. "Ma'am." She was looking up at a weld seam 11 feet above her head. "I'd like the shoring log," she said. "All of it." Quill did not answer. He was looking at her hands. Both gloves were the same age and brand. The left was worn at the palm the way any glove wears. The right was worn through at the tips of the first 3 fingers, and nowhere else. And there is exactly one job in a shipyard that does that to a glove. And it is not welding, and it is not rigging. It is running your hand along 206 block caps, over and over, for 19 years. "Day 1 through day 41, Quill said. "Day 1 through this morning. That's 4 binders. Then I'll need somewhere to put them." Above them, Garrick picked his coffee back up off the rail. It had not spilled. He drank from it, looked down at the 2 of them on the sole, and walked aft toward the brow. Unhurried, a man who had settled something. On the opposite wall, in the doorway of his shack, Quill had already taken out the notebook he kept in his breast pocket, and he was writing down the time. The dock master's shack smelled of paper and diesel. Quill put 4 ring binders on the plan table at 7:15 and stood back. She did not open the log. She went to the docking plan first. The big linen-backed drawing pinned under acrylic on the long wall, showing the block layout, the shore positions, the camber, the weight distribution frame by frame. She read it the way a person reads a map of a place they have already been to. "The camber's set for a 2-inch sag amidships," she said. "Correct for this hull and this load condition. Whoever laid it out knew what they were doing." "That was me," Quill said. "I know. Your initials are in the corner." She moved along to the starboard shoreline, frames 190 through 220, and put 1 finger on the drawing. "Your log says the afterside shores went in on day 6, 16 of them. All 16 installed and verified in a single 8-hour shift, 1 signature." She turned around. "Show me." They walked it at 7:30. She took a flashlight and a folding rule off the shack wall and did not ask permission for either. A side shore is a steel jack set at an angle between the dock wall and the hull, and its job is to stop 9,200 tons of destroyer from doing the one thing it wants to do standing on blocks in air, which is fall over. 16 were listed for that stretch of hull. She counted them out loud as she went. She got to 11. Then she stopped at the 12th position and put the light on it. Bare concrete, a chalk mark from day 1, and a pallet of scaffold clamps parked where the shore should have been. 12, she said. Empty. The 13th was empty. The 14th was a jack set on a cracked cap block, and she went down on one knee on the wet concrete and put the light sideways across the crack so it threw a shadow, which is the only way to read a crack in a cap, and said nothing for 11 seconds. "That's a shear crack," Quill said quietly. "Yes." The 15th was empty. The 16th was in place, and correctly set, and beautifully done, and she said so. Then she looked back down the line at the 4 positions that existed on paper and did not exist in the dock. 16 shores, 1 shift, 1 man. She folded the rule. Nobody sets 16 shores in 8 hours. 2 men working clean, jacks already staged. That's a day and a half. He didn't set 4 of them at all, and he wrote down that he did. "No," Quill said. "Nobody does 16. The 2 riggers had drifted over by then. the way yard workers do when somebody with a flashlight kneels down. "Ma'am," Delgado said. "Is that bad?" She answered without looking up from the plan she had brought out with her. "The altar's fine. The caisson's fine. Your camber's fine. Your soul is clean. The problem is your shores. This hull comes off these blocks in 9 days, and 4 of the things holding her steady while she does it are a signature. Altar, caisson, camber, soul, shores." Delgado had been in the yard 6 years and had never once heard a person from outside the fence use all 5 of those words correctly in one sentence. Wall, gate, sag, floor, props. That is what outsiders said. He looked at the other rigger. The other rigger had heard it too. Nobody called her the contractor lady again. From 7:41 that morning, they called her ma'am, and they meant something different by it. At 8 o'clock, Chief Garrick Sturgis came along the catwalk and saw his sister standing at the plan table in the dock master's shack with the ship's force, shoring log open in front of her and the dock master beside her, and he came down the ladder fast. He did not raise his voice. He was better than that in front of riggers. "Those are ship's force records," he said, and closed the binder under her hand and picked up all 4. "This is a maintenance availability, not a tourist attraction. If your company wants documentation, it can put that in writing to the port engineer." "All right," she said. That was all. She let go of the binder before he had finished pulling on it, so there was no moment of resistance for anybody to watch. Garrick carried the 4 binders up the ladder toward the brow, and he took his time doing it, because he wanted it seen. When he was gone, Quill went to the copier in the corner of the shack and took out the 40 pages he had run off at 7:20, while she was reading the plan on the wall. "I didn't ask you to do that," she said. "No, ma'am. You didn't." She took a pen off the table, pushed her left sleeve back, and wrote 4 numbers on the inside of her wrist. 201, 206, 211, 215. The frames where the 4 missing shores should have been. Then she pulled the sleeve down over them. "Mr. Quill," she said, "who signed the Day 6 page?" He already had it on top of the stack. He turned it around on the table and put 1 finger on the signature block, and neither of them said the name out loud, because the name was printed there in block capitals underneath the signature, and it was the same name she had. By 11 o'clock, the dock had a story about her, and the story was good. And a good story travels a shipyard faster than a phone call. In the ship's force work center, with 14 people eating an early lunch out of paper bags, Chief Garrick Sturgis was telling it. "My sister," he said. "My actual sister. 1998. She gets the scholarship. Full ride. 4 years of somebody else's money and a set of ensign bars at the end of it. And I'm at the yard on the Gulf that whole time, burning rod 9 hours a day for $11 an hour." He was funny about it. He had been telling this story for 24 years and had worked it the way a man works a weld, grinding off everything that did not land. 20 years later, she's got a corner office and a parking space, and a title with 4 words in it. And this morning, she is down there. He pointed at the deck with 2 fingers, at the dock underneath them, counting my blocks, with a torchlight. She has never once in her life had grease under her fingernails, and she is down there counting my blocks. 6 people laughed. One of the people who laughed was hull maintenance technician 3rd class Marguerite Osei, who was 23 years old and had been in the Navy for 2 years and 4 months, and who laughed because everybody at her table laughed, and she was the newest person at it. At 12:20, she stopped finding it funny. Annika had come back to the ladder at the forward end of the Soul, and a sailor was standing at the bottom of it with his arms crossed. "Soul's closed, ma'am. Hot work evolution." She looked past him down 480 meters of dry dock. No fire watch. No hot work permit board turned. No smoke. no arc flash, no shield down, no sentry at the far end, and no hot work scheduled in Dry Dock 4 for 3 days. "Understood," she said. She walked back up the apron, waited 4 minutes by the clock on the shack, came down the afterladder where nobody was standing, and went to work. At 1:10, she was at the tank top hatch at frame 140 when Osei came past with a bucket. "Petty Officer Osei," the girl stopped. "I'd like the void and tank inspection sheets for tanks 5 through 16. Osei's face did a thing. It happened fast, and she got on top of it fast. But it happened. "Ma'am, I'd have to ask the chief." "That's all right." Annika did not push. She looked at the girl's belt instead, where a flashlight was clipped, still in the clear plastic package it had come in from supply, the battery seal intact. "How many of those 12 tanks have you personally been inside?" Osei looked at the bucket in her hand. "2, ma'am." "How many did you sign for?" The girl did not answer. She stood in the passageway with a bucket of rags, and the not answering was the answer, and both of them knew it. "All right," Annika said. "Thank you. Petty Officer, that light's no good to you in a package." She left it there. She did not tell her what to do about it. She walked forward and left the girl standing at frame 140 with a sealed flashlight on her belt and a thing to think about, which was more than anybody had given her in 2 years. At 2 o'clock, Quill slid a single photograph across the plan table without being asked. It was the Day 6 page. Full frame, corner to corner, the timestamp legible in the header block, and the signature legible at the bottom. He had not mentioned the Catwalk. He had not asked her name, or what company she was from, or why a contractor's assistant knew the word altar. He had photographed 40 pages before she asked, and he had put this one on the table now. And that was the whole of what Thaddeus Quill had to say on the subject. Then she went through the tank certification sheets, 12 of them, tanks 5 through 16, and laid them out on the plan table in a row, like a hand of cards. Tank 5, certified gas-free, structurally inspected, entry logged and closed. Tank 6, the same. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. All 12 time-stamped inside a single 8-hour shift on day 19. All 12 signed by one man. 12 tanks. A void in a destroyer is a steel box you enter through a manhole 18 inches across, on a ladder, with a light and a gas meter. And you look at every frame and stiffener and weld in it. And then you climb out. 1 tank done properly is 90 minutes. 12 is 3 days. 12 signatures. 1 shift. 1 name. And the name was her brother's. If you have ever been the person in the room who checked, while everyone else signed, stay with her. Subscribe to Honor Tales, because what she does over the next 4 days is not revenge, and it is not loud, and it is going to cost her more than it costs him. On Wednesday morning, Garrick stopped telling the story and started filing. At 8:30, he was in the project superintendent's trailer on the North Apron, and Warner Lindholm was standing at a whiteboard with a schedule on it in 4 colors. Lindholm was 51, had been running availabilities for 19 years, and had a face like a closed ledger. The board said 41 days elapsed, 50 days planned, undocking Friday. And under undocking Friday, somebody had written a number in red that was not a date. "There's a woman on the Soul with no badge," Garrick said. "She's pulling tank records." "Whose is she?" "Nobody's. That's the point. Visitor sticker and coveralls with nothing on them." Lindholm looked at the board. "Friday," he said. "Water in the dock. Friday. The contract has an acceleration clause, and the clause has a date on it, and the date is Friday. I don't need this hull perfect, Chief. I need it wet." He capped the marker. "She is not on my critical path. Make her not be on my dock." At 10 o'clock, her visitor sticker was voided, The pass and identification office was a window in a cinder block building by the main gate, and the clerk behind it was apologetic in the professional way of a man who had done this 11 times that month. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The sponsoring activity withdrew this morning. Once that happens, the sticker's dead, and I can't reissue against a withdrawn sponsor." "Who is the sponsoring activity?" The clerk turned the monitor a few degrees, which he was not supposed to do, and read it off the screen. "Regional Maintenance Center, code 230. Annika stood at the window for a moment. Code 230 was surface ship maintenance, and code 230 reported to the deputy commander for surface ship maintenance. The officer who had signed the no-notice material inspection order that put every yardbird in Dry Dock 4 on the Soul at 0600 Tuesday, and who had then driven down to walk the dock personally, in coveralls, the way she had walked every dock for 19 years. Her brother had filed a trespass complaint against her office. Against her. He did not know that, and would not for 2 more days. He had gone to the pass office because a chief petty officer knows exactly which window in which cinder block building makes a problem go away by lunchtime. The withdrawal went up through the sponsoring activity for signature, and the sponsoring activity signed it, because in an organization of 1,100 people, a routine sponsorship withdrawal for an unbadged contractor is a thing a lieutenant signs on a Wednesday without reading the name. "Thank you," Annika said to the clerk. "That's helpful." At 11:30, she was outside the fence. There's a strip of cracked asphalt on the public side of the north gate, with 3 bollards, a light pole, and a view down the length of Dry Dock 4 through 8-gauge chain link. She set a folding chair against the pole, put a laptop on her knees, and worked. She had the 40 photographed pages, the 12 tank certifications, the docking plan on the screen, and no blocks to touch. So she counted them on the plan, right index finger down the port line, 1 cap at a time, same interval, same pause at each. 41, 42, 43. The way she had done it on the Soul and every year since 2007. A woman in a folding chair on a public sidewalk, counting 206 keel blocks she could not reach. Yard workers came out at lunch and looked at her and went back in. At 2:20, she made 1 telephone call. Rear Admiral Odette Bramwell had commanded the Regional Maintenance Center for 14 months and had known Annika Sturgis for 9 years, and she picked up on the second ring. The call lasted 41 seconds. "My sponsorship's been withdrawn," Annika said. "My sticker's void. I'm outside the north gate. I'll have it back in 20 minutes. No." There was a pause on the line. "No, ma'am," Annika said. "Don't move anything. Don't call the yard. Don't call the ship. I want to see what they do when nobody helps me. Annika, they flood that dock Friday. They flood it when I say they flood it. That part is already handled and none of them have read it yet." A truck went past on the public road behind her, and she waited for it. "Ma'am, I've got 4 missing shores and 12 tank certifications signed in 1 shift. If I badge back in this afternoon, he stops. If I stay out here, he keeps going. And in 2 days, I'll have a package instead of an argument." Another pause. "Understood," Bramwell said. "Nobody's been told you called." "Thank you, ma'am." She put the phone face down on the laptop and looked through the chain link at the dock. By Wednesday night, the woman who had signed the order that opened Dry Dock 4 to inspection was sitting on a public sidewalk in a folding chair with a voided sticker on her hard hat, and inside the fence, on the Soul, a crew was scaffolding out the last of the shoreline for Friday. Friday was 36 hours away. Thaddeus Quill stayed in the shack after the second shift went home on Wednesday night, and at 9 o'clock, he did the thing he had been not doing for 2 days. He read the cover sheet of the docking plan. A docking plan has 4 pages before it has any drawings. Page 1 is the ship and the availability. Page 2 is the block layout and the weight condition. Page 3 is the certification chain. Page 4 is the release authority. And the third signature block on page 4 is the officer, without whose name nobody on earth may put water into that dock. In 29 years, Quill had read page 4 perhaps 4 times. Nobody reads page 4. It is a formality signed by somebody at a headquarters 200 miles away who has never seen the caisson. He read it. Undocking authority. A. Sturgis, Capt. USN, Engineering Duty Officer, Deputy Commander for Surface Ship Maintenance. Quill took his glasses off and set them on the plan table. "Oh no," he said, to an empty shack. 29 years in the yard had taught him that the second most dangerous thing in a dry dock is water. He had always known the first, and had never been able to put it in a sentence until that moment. Sitting alone at 9 at night with a woman's name in front of him in 10-point type. The most dangerous thing in a dry dock is a signature nobody reads. At 5:45 on Thursday morning, he came out through the north gate with 2 cups of coffee and gave her one, and she took it, and he stood beside the folding chair and looked through the chain link at his own dock for a while before he said anything. "You ordered it," he said. "I ordered it. No notice material inspection. 0600 Tuesday. Every tank, every void, every shore." He drank his coffee. "That was you. That was me. And then you came and walked it yourself. I always walk it myself." Quill nodded slowly. "You could have ended this Tuesday morning," he said. "On the soul. Before he ever got his hand on you. You could have said 11 words, and that man would have been on the deck plates. Yes. Why didn't you?" She turned the coffee cup around in her hands once. "Because if I say the 11 words on Tuesday morning," she said, "then I know what my brother says to a woman he thinks is nobody. That's all I get. I already knew that." She looked through the fence. "I don't ever find out what he signs." Quill did not have anything to say to that. At 6, she got up and started down the fence line, and he noticed the way she went. 120 paces. Stop. Look. 4 minutes. Another 120. And realized she had been doing it since Tuesday. She was working the dock from outside it on a fixed interval, 1 frame at a time, the way you work a hull when you cannot get closer than 60 feet. He noticed something else, too. At every stop, she read the dewatering board first, then the tide plot taped beside it, and only then did she look at the people. Everybody looks at the people first. That is what people are for. "Ma'am," he said, "the tide Friday morning is a 2.1 at 0600. 2.14, she said, without turning around. "And they'll be at the caisson at 0600 regardless, because the acceleration clause pays on the calendar day, not the tide." At 1 o'clock that afternoon, on the quarterdeck of a destroyer, standing 41 feet above the concrete on 206 blocks, Commander Reuben Ackley asked his docking officer a question. Ackley was 43 and had commanded the ship for 19 months and had spent every one of the last 42 days trying to get her back in the water. "There's a material inspection order in my message traffic from Monday," he said. "No notice. What's the status?" "It's a contractor thing, sir," Garrick said. "There was a woman on the Soul with no badge-pulling records. It's handled." "Handled how?" "Pass office. She's outside the fence." Ackley looked at his docking officer for a second and a half. Then he said, "All right, Chief," and went below, because he had a hull that undocked in 17 hours, and a chief petty officer with 24 years in, who had never once given him a reason to look twice, and because that is how it happens. Not with a lie. With a man who is tired believing a man he has no reason not to believe. So on Thursday afternoon, the dockmaster knew, and the commanding officer of the ship did not, and the caisson was scheduled to open in 17 hours. If you want to know what she was waiting for, because she was waiting, and she was letting a dock be rigged for flooding while she waited. Stay with this one and subscribe to Honor Tales. Thursday morning is the last quiet morning in this story. At 11 o'clock on Thursday night, she laid 2 pieces of paper side by side on a motel bedspread 8 kilometers from the gate. One was the Day 6 shoring page from Dry Dock 4, photographed by a dock master on a Tuesday morning in July of 2026. The other was 19 years old, creased in 4 places from being folded in a pocket, the paper gone the color of weak tea, a shoring verification sheet from a graving dock in a different yard on a different coast, dated the 11th of March, 2007. They were the same shape, same columns, same 16 positions, same one signature at the bottom of a page that should have carried 3, and the same impossible little cluster of times in the right-hand margin, written by a person who had filled in a column while sitting down. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at them for a long time, and for the first time in 4 days, she let herself think about it, in the first person, which was a thing she permitted herself, perhaps twice a year. I know what this is because I did it. She had been 27, a lieutenant, 6 months into the engineering duty community, assistant docking officer on an undocking she had wanted very badly to do well, awake for 21 hours. At 2 in the morning, a rigging foreman she liked and respected had come up the ladder with the verification sheet, said the after-shoring set was in and sound, all 16, and held out the pen. She had not walked it. It was raining, and she had been awake for 21 hours, and the man had been in that yard for 26 years, and she had taken the pen and she had signed. It took 9 seconds. At 6:20 that morning they had started flooding. A ship coming off the blocks is the most dangerous 10 minutes in a shipyard. For a few centimeters of rising water, the hull is neither held by the blocks nor floated by the sea, and it is in those centimeters that a ship finds out whether the shores were where the paper said they were. The hull took a set. Not much. Perhaps 11 degrees, and then it came back, and the whole of it lasted under 4 seconds, and afterward the ship was fine, and the dock was fine, and the availability finished only 2 days late. Emmett Pike was 52 years old, a rigger, 26 years in that yard, 3 grandchildren, and he had been under the turn of the bilge on the starboard side, clearing a staging plank when the hull moved. She remembered 2 things about that morning, and she had never once been able to remember a third. She remembered the sound. Not the ship, the sound afterward. Every machine in a working shipyard stopping inside about 9 seconds, one after another, from the near end of the dock to the far end, until there was nothing at all, but the water still coming in through the valves because nobody had thought to close them yet. And she remembered her own handwriting on that sheet. The loop of the A. She had had a young woman's handwriting then. The Board of Investigation found the shoring foreman primarily at fault, the yard's schedule pressure a contributing cause, and the assistant docking officer's certification a contributing cause. She was issued a letter, and she kept her commission, which she had not expected and had not wanted. 19 years later, on a motel bedspread, a 46-year-old captain in the engineering duty community looked at a page with her brother's name on it that was the same shape as a page with hers. She did not cry. She had not cried about it in 11 years, and she was not going to start in a motel. She took a green notebook out of the coverall pocket on the chair. The 4th green notebook, the first 3 were in a box in a garage in Virginia, and she opened it to a clean page, and she wrote at the top of it, in block capitals, 3 words. Touch it yourself. She had written those 3 words at the top of every docking plan, every inspection order, and every notebook she had opened since the 12th of March, 2007. People at 3 Commands thought it was a superstition. 2 people alive knew what it was, one of them a rear admiral, and neither had ever said the name Emmett Pike out loud to her. 19 years of walking every block line personally. 19 years of putting one hand flat on every cap in sequence and counting them, 206 of them on this hull, in a dry dock, at 6:15 in the morning, in coveralls with nothing on them, because a person who has signed for something she did not see will spend the rest of her working life making certain she never does it again. And on Tuesday morning, a man had shoved her off a catwalk for doing it. She turned off the lamp at midnight. Friday's flooding was scheduled for 0600. He crossed the line at 10:15 on Thursday morning, which she did not know about until 11:30, and which she had been waiting for since Tuesday afternoon. A ship's force maintenance system is a networked application on a government terminal. It records the user identification, the workstation, the time to the second, the field changed, the value before and the value after, and it cannot be talked to. Chief Garrick Sturgis sat down at the work center terminal at 10:15 with the door closed and amended 2 tank entries. Tank 11, entry date changed from day 19 to day 22. Tank 14, inspector field changed from 1 name to 2. 4 minutes, both. Then he closed the record, went out to the passageway, and called for Osei. She came up from the tank top with a bucket. He had the sheet in his hand and a pen on top of it. "Sign it." She looked at the sheet. "Chief, that's tank 14. "I know what it is." "Sign it." "I've never been in 14. You were in there on the 22nd with me." "Chief," and her voice did the thing that a 23-year-old's voice does when she can feel her whole career standing on a piece of paper. "On the 22nd, I was on the barge. There's a muster. I wasn't in 14. I've never been in 14. He did not shout at her. It would have been better for him if he had, because a shouted order in a passageway with 2 people in it is a thing that can be denied afterward. Instead, he looked at her for a moment, and then he said in an ordinary voice, the way a man asks about the weather, "You were in there." And she signed it. She signed because he was a chief petty officer with 24 years in, and she was a third class with 2, and because in the 4 seconds she had to decide she could not find the shape of a world in which she said no. Then she went out to the ladder well and stood there a while with the pen still in her hand. At 11:30, Quill came out through the north gate and told Annika, standing at the chain link, and he told it flat and fast, the way a man reports a casualty. He's been in the system, 10:15, and he had the Osei girl sign for a tank she's never opened, and she signed it, and she's 23 years old. He had expected her to move since 5:45 the previous morning, and now there was a sailor's name on a false certification, and he expected her to walk to the gate and say the 11 words and end it. She did not move. She had the docking plan open on the laptop on her knees, and her right index finger was going down the port block line at the same interval she had used on the Soul. 41, 42, 43. "You're going to let him do it," Quill said. "He already did it," she said. "At 10:15. There's a user identification and a workstation and a timestamp on it, and it is on a government system, and it cannot be unwritten. And it is the only thing in 4 days that is not a matter of opinion." Her finger stopped at a cap. Everything else, a good sea lawyer argues. 4 missing shores. A crew took them out for scaffold access and will put them back Friday. 12 certifications in a shift. An administrative practice, sir. Everybody signs at the end of the week for the work of the week. And this isn't. He amended a record after he was told it was being questioned. She wrote a number on her wrist. "I'm going to let it finish saving itself." And the girl? Annika was quiet for a second. The girl is the only person in that work center who told the truth out loud before she signed, she said. "I heard her do it yesterday, with a bucket in her hand. She'll be all right. I'll see to it that she's all right. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Garrick came out of the north gate to his truck, and his sister was 60 feet away on the other side of the chain link, standing up out of the folding chair. He looked at her, and she smiled at him. It was not a large smile, and it was not an unkind one. It was the first time in 4 days, and the first time in some years, that she had smiled at her brother at all. And she did it across 60 feet of 8-gauge fence at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then she sat back down and went on reading. Garrick stood by the truck with the door open for 11 seconds. He could not have told anybody why it frightened him. There was nothing in it to be frightened of. She was outside the fence with a voided badge and a folding chair, and he had put her there. He got in the truck and drove home, and did not sleep well. At 0600 on Friday, there were 41 people on the caisson platform at the seaward end of Dry Dock 4. The tide was 2.14. The flood valves were manned, the dewatering pump secured and tagged out. The last of the staging had come down, and the shoreline stood clear. 16 positions on the starboard side aft, 12 of them occupied. The yard's flooding crew had been on station since 5:30. Commander Reuben Ackley was in khakis with his ball cap on, standing where a commanding officer stands, which is close enough to see and far enough not to interfere. Warner Lindholm had the acceleration clause in his jacket pocket and 41 days of schedule behind his teeth. "Sign the sheet," he said. Quill had the release sheet on a clipboard against his chest, and he had been standing like that for 6 minutes. "I can't. Mr. Quill, I have watched you flood that dock 11 times in 4 years. You've watched me operate the caisson 11 times in 4 years. That's a different job." Quill did not raise his voice either. "I'm the dock master. I run the Evolution. I am not the release authority, and neither are you. And neither is the captain of that ship. And this morning, I actually read page 4. "Then read it out loud," Ackley said. Quill turned the clipboard around. "Undocking authority," he read. "A. Sturgis, Captain, United States Navy, Engineering Duty Officer, Deputy Commander for Surface Ship Maintenance." There's a sound a dry dock makes when 41 people stop talking at the same time, and it is not silence, because the shore power cables hum, and the harbor is right there. It is worse than silence. Ackley turned his head very slowly and looked at his docking officer. Chief Garrick Sturgis had his clipboard under his arm and a paper cup of coffee in his right hand, and his face went through the whole of it in the time it took Quill to read 14 words. Confusion first, because A. Sturgis is a common enough name, and there are 11 Sturgises in the Navy. Then disbelief, because there are not 11 engineering duty officers named A. Sturgis. Then recognition, which arrived with a physical jolt. A woman in blank coveralls on his catwalk at 6:31 on Tuesday, with her hand flat on a block cap and a worn-through glove, who had used the words alter and caisson and camber correctly, who had found his shoring log 4 shores short in 11 minutes, and who had not looked at him after he pushed her. And then horror, which is a slower thing and settles into a man's face from the jaw upward, as he understood, standing on a caisson platform in front of 41 people, exactly which pieces of paper he had signed his name to in the last 4 days, and exactly whose desk they were going to land on. The coffee cup was still in his hand. He did not drop it. He set it down on the deck plate, very carefully, the way a man does when he has understood something. "Chief," Ackley said, "say your sister's rank out loud." Garrick's mouth opened. Nothing came out of it. At 6:11 the north gate opened, and she came through on foot with a hard hat under her arm and a voided visitor sticker still stuck to the front of it, and the security officer who had voided it on Wednesday held the gate and did not look at her as she went past. She was still in the coveralls. She had not put on a uniform. That detail went around the yard for 2 years afterward, that she came in Friday morning in the same blank coveralls she had been thrown off a catwalk in on Tuesday, because coveralls are what you wear on a dock sole, and she had come to work. She walked to the caisson platform and stopped in front of Lindholm and Ackley and her brother, and she did not raise her voice, and she asked for 2 things in order. I'd like the tank certification package for tanks 5 through 16, and I'd like the maintenance system audit log for this work center for the last 72 hours. She looked at the flood valves. And the dock stays dry. Ma'am, Lindholm said, the clause. Mr. Lindholm, nobody flood tests a hull whose tanks were certified by a man who signed 16 shores in a single shift. Not on my authority, and it is my authority. Your clause is between your company and the contracting officer, and I'll have an opinion on it at 10 this morning. She turned. Commander Ackley, walk the port block line with me. They went down to the sole together, a commander in khakis and a captain in blank coveralls, and at block 1 she laid her right hand flat on the cap, and this time she counted out loud. 1. Ackley put his hand on the next one. 2. They walked 206 blocks in 51 minutes with a flashlight in front of the entire flooding crew and found 4 bad caps. 4 out of 206. The last was at frame 204, a sheer crack you could only see if you put the light on it sideways, and a 9,200-ton destroyer had been standing on it for 41 days. The cascade ran from 10 Friday morning to close of business Saturday, and none of it was loud, and nobody was placed in handcuffs. At 1400 on Friday, Rear Admiral Odette Bramwell sat at the head of a conference table with 11 people around it and signed a formal re-inspection order. 12 tanks, independent inspectors from a second activity, 72 hours. No ship's force personnel from the affected work center inside any of them. Warner Lindholm's acceleration plan went to the contracting officer at 1420 with the bonus clause flagged and a 2-page memorandum attached. The response arrived Monday, and it was not a short one. Chief Garrick Sturgis was relieved as ship's force docking officer at 1510, and his docking qualification pulled the same afternoon. The maintenance system audit log, user identification, workstation, timestamp, value before, value after, went into an administrative package with a signed statement from a 23-year-old third class, and the package went where those packages go. He was 24 years and 4 months into a 25-year wall, and his senior chief board packet had gone in 11 days earlier, and it was over. Not with a court-martial, with paperwork, which is how it actually ends for almost everybody. Bramwell asked the question anyway. Do you want a criminal referral? No, ma'am. He falsified 12 safety certifications, and he put his hands on you in front of 9 witnesses. I know what he did. She had the docking plan in front of her and had not looked up from it. I don't want him arrested. I want the tanks opened. At 10 on Saturday morning, hull maintenance technician 3rd class Marguerite Osei went down the ladder into tank 11 first. Her own flashlight, out of its package, batteries in it, lanyard on her wrist, a gas meter, a tender at the manhole, and a checklist she had printed herself at 0530. She was in there 1 hour and 50 minutes, which is what a tank actually takes, and came out with 3 findings nobody had caught in 42 days. A cracked stiffener bracket at frame 148, wastage on a longitudinal below the sounding tube, and a manhole gasket landing painted over instead of prepared. The independent inspector read her write-up in the ladder well and asked how long she had been doing tank work. 2 years and 4 months. Sir, this is the 3rd one I've ever actually been inside. Then get inside 9 more, he said. You're better at it than the man who signed for 12. At 6:30 on Saturday evening, Garrick was at his truck in the north lot with a cardboard box on the passenger seat, and his sister was 4 feet away, and it was the only time in 5 days they spoke as brother and sister. Did you come down here to do this to me? No. Annika, I signed the inspection order on the 9th, she said, It covers 4 holes in 3 yards. I did not know you were on this ship until you were standing in front of me on that catwalk Tuesday morning. And that was worse. Both of them knew it the moment it was said, and neither of them said so. It would have been survivable if she had come for him, a thing between 2 people who were related, with somewhere to put it. But she had not come for him. She had come for a dry dock, the way she had come for 11 other dry docks that year, and he had been standing in it. "You could have told me who you were," Garrick said. "You could have asked." He put the box in the truck and shut the door. If this one got to you, if you have ever been the person nobody bothered to ask, leave a comment and subscribe to Honor Tales, because these are the stories that don't get told out loud, and there is one more thing to tell in this one. At midnight midnight on Sunday morning, Dry Dock 4 was empty. The sodium lights were on because they are always on. The destroyer stood 41 feet above the Soul on 206 keel blocks, 4 of them flagged with orange paint and due to be changed on Tuesday. The caisson was shut. The dock was dry. There was not another human being inside 480 meters of concrete. She walked the port line one more time. Block 41, Block 42, Block 43. All the way aft, one hand flat on every cap, counting, in coveralls with nothing on them, at midnight on a Sunday, because there was nobody to see her do it, and that had never once been the point. At frame 204, she stopped and left her hand on the cap for a while. Then she took the green notebook out of her pocket and read the 3 words at the top of the clean page. "Touch it yourself." Her phone lit up on the block cap beside her hand. It was from a port engineer named Cassius Dre, at a yard on the opposite coast, where a second hole went into a graving dock in 3 weeks, under an availability carrying the same superintendent's signature and the same shoring subcontractor. 4 words. "Blocks are set. Come look." She looked north up 480 meters of empty dry dock. She typed 1 word back. Then she put the notebook in her pocket, picked up the hard hat with the voided visitor sticker still stuck to the front of it, and walked out through the caisson gate. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.